Welcome back to the Manifest Massively podcast. I have Jasmine with me again. And if you haven't listened to our first podcast episode, I was just saying how great it was. It's such a powerful conversation about manifestation. And like I shared, Jasmine has, I think, a really unique and powerful take on manifestation. So I love talking with her about it. And then through that conversation, we started talking about relationships and love. And there was just some really powerful topics that came up. And so we just decided to record a whole other episode about it because if you're out there in the process of wanting a relationship, if you're in literally as we speak, manifesting a relationship, then I know this conversation is going to absolutely inspire you to keep on that journey. If you didn't listen to the last episode, Jasmine is a manifestation coach and has actually a lot of experience having had another business where she taught and helped people. So, where do we begin with this whole how to manifest a relationship thing?
I don't know. I think we could start with what we were experiencing right when we manifested our
Yeah.
relationships and just go from there.
Yeah. Do you want to start?
I could start. I was really young. So I've been with my partner since I was 16.
Wow.
So I was young when this happened, but I was on the spiritual journey really early. And so I had started doing work around love and around relationships really early
Yeah.
because I was not surrounded by the best relationships. They were just not. I was like, if I ever want to grow up and have a family, I don't want it to be like this. So even though I was really young, I could recognize that at least. And so I also really liked romantic books when I was younger. I liked romantic movies. My aunt and I would watch rom-coms all the time. So I was just surrounded by it and really thought about it a lot. And I think from that experience, I really was just very specific. I didn't know I was doing the work, but I was doing the work. I was very specific about what I wanted, and I attracted it very easily because of that specificity.
That's awesome. So it was like your upbringing was like a contrast of what you actually wanted, and you sorted into that and then just got really clear from a really young age, it sounds like, of this is exactly what I want. And then I feel like there was, how do you feel self worth came into play about that?
So I think I have a maybe more unpopular take about that. I don't think self-worth ultimately matters when it comes to attracting a relationship, maybe more about keeping it and keeping it healthy.
Hmm.
But I think there's a lot of focus around like healing when you're attracting a relationship. And I think that works. That's totally fine. It wasn't my experience, but I think it works. I think though that it's more about seeing yourself as the main character is the best way I could put it. If you're watching a romantic movie and the character is like messing up the date, she's like not saying the right thing, she orders super messy food, you as the viewer know her and the guy are going to end up together. It doesn't matter if she's messing it up. It doesn't matter if she's awkward. It doesn't matter if she doesn't like herself. None of that matters because love for her is inevitable. So if you see
Yeah.
yourself that way, then that doesn't matter.
Oh my gosh. I feel like just that in and of itself is such a powerful belief to like anchor in that it's inevitable. I know for me on my journey, and I'll share a little bit more about my past in a second, but I know for me, I had I definitely wavered on whether or not it was inevitable. I would question and I would be, oh my gosh, is it going to happen? Am I just going to end up alone forever? And that sort of internal self doubt narrative. But what made the difference for me is that at least when I was in the process of consciously and intentionally deciding, and there was a period of time where I was, this is going to happen.
Mhm.
And even when I would waver, I would come back to that. And
Yeah.
I think that training myself to let myself have the freakouts and the upsets when I had some, but then to come back to, and I didn't have that word, like I didn't have the inevitability. I love that. Like in our last episode, we talked a lot about self concept. And I really love this image of the rom-com because it really gives you, and from a neurolinguistic programming standpoint, like how you see yourself, how you experience yourself is really prominent. Because, for example, if I say the word car, you're not necessarily going to see the letter CAR. You're gonna think of your car, or you're gonna think of
Yeah.
cars driving down the road, right? and that's going to show up in your internal state, however that is for you, likely in a visual. So when you said that about the movie, it's, oh my gosh, what an amazing internal representation of seeing yourself maybe spilling something on the date, maybe messing something up, but that ultimately seeing you play out in that inevitability. I just love that. Love, love that.
Yeah.
So where would you say then is self-concept? So like self-worth not as important in terms of the obviously you have to have that to some degree, but it sounds like you don't need to focus on that so heavily because the right person's going to think you're worthy no matter what, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So then self-concept I know is like a big core of your work. So how would you say that?
Well, I think if you have the self concept that like you're the main character in your own life, your own movie, then that is a part of your self concept in and of itself. Cause I think a lot of people feel like side characters in their own life. So
Mhm.
when you switch into feeling like certain things are just like inevitable for you, that can just be a part of your self-concept. I think for me, that was a very early part of my self-concept, even before the love work, because I always felt like I was like the protagonist of my own story. Like I always felt that way. And so I think that has a lot to do with it as well.
That has such good energy to it. So, in the work that I teach and in my own experience, there was a point where I really didn't have dating skills. From a young age, I would get into relationship after relationship, and those relationships definitely weren't healthy, as I too was not modeled healthy relationships from a young age. And so, rather than realizing, like in your story, at a young age, that I needed to change something, I got into a string of really unhealthy relationships through my 20s and in I think until like my early 30s, because that's when I met Evan. So oftentimes in dating, which I didn't have these skills until I learned them, and that is something that because not for everybody, but sometimes we do have to date. Sometimes that is something that is required to do to meet your person. And there's no manual, right? Nobody teaches you how to do that. And yet it is a social skill. Dating is a social thing and it is a social skill. And I think more and more we are, at least I am, I'm more so behind my computer. I'm more so at home. I'm not as extroverted and out there as possible. And I think we do live in a world where that is more prominent than it used to be. And so it's that much more scary, anxiety producing to date. But to go back to that main character energy, one of the switches that I made in my dating was as I would date, I would be like, do they like me? Are they into me? Like trying to figure that
Yeah.
out. And I stopped doing that. And instead, I was like, am I into them?
Yes.
Are
This is a
they
huge part of it for me too.
qualified to be with me? And I
Mhm.
really hear that in the embodiment of main character energy, like you're saying, because even though I didn't see it exactly that way, it literally did shift that for me, where it's this is my world and this is my life. And are you a match for it? Not like trying to bend and twist to see if I'm a match for you.
Yes. I think with women specifically or just female aligned people, it's very second nature to us to step into the observed role and not the observer. And when you make that switch of, no, you're not watching me, I'm watching you, it's very powerful.
Yeah, huge. And I love how you said observer because I know you already know at the core of quantum manifesting or the quantum physics of manifesting is the power of the observer. And
Yes, exactly.
how we observe something, it affects reality. And
Yeah.
it's a little, I feel like I want to use the word elusive. Like it doesn't feel that way all the time, right? We don't experience that. It more so feels like life is just happening to us and there's no connection.
Yeah.
But like you said, how we observe, how we use the power of observation, how we're observing the situation, the story we're telling about it, the story we're telling about ourselves literally impacts how that reality shows up. And I even feel like if you master and hone that one thing, like it can change so much.
Yeah, I agree. It can make the entire difference. This is exactly like what you were saying. It's not just, are you like, am I good enough for you? It's, are you going to fit into my life? Do I like you? Can I see myself with you? I think just asking those questions can change everything. Because I feel like sometimes when we're looking for something, we can feel frantic about it, even desperate about it, which is normal. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're in that energy, you can't think clearly. And that very much like devolves into settling energy, which is not what we want.
Exactly. I was definitely the girl that had a lot of desperation until I didn't, right? And so I know what it's like to be in that state, and it just does not produce it definitely doesn't produce like a healthy, long-standing relationship because you're more willing to let things go. You're more willing to overlook red flags. You're more willing to overlook the things that actually say that partner just really isn't a match for. And then you go a year down the line, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, and it can who knows what else? I know it caused a lot of havoc in my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we can come to the process of manifesting our person or come through the process of dating with this whole heart, just like you said, not being perfect, not like we have to be this happy, perfect person all the time, but that we have our own back and that we really are
Yes.
there for ourselves no matter what, unconditionally, then it creates like an environment to actually be able to create that kind of relationship with someone else.
I think a huge part of it is also just being honest with yourself. Like a lot of people will make these imaginary lists of what they think they should have in a partner.
Hmm.
And they'll do things to meet that partner that don't feel natural to them. Like dating apps are fun. I've never been on them because, like I said, I was really young when I found my person. But I've had friends who were on them and I've helped make their Tinder profiles and stuff like in college. But if you don't feel like you should be doing that, then you shouldn't do that. If intuitively you're like, I don't want to meet this person on a dating app, like I want to meet this person in a coffee shop, that might seem random. That might seem like even unreasonable. But if that's what you want, you shouldn't settle. Like you can have it the way that you want to have it.
Agreed. Yeah, I definitely think if you don't feel drawn to the dating apps, then definitely don't do them. But I will also say that if that's the case, get out there because it's
I
not
agree.
like you have to be around people to meet people.
No, it's just about listing to yourself. If you're a speed dating girly, go do that. If you want to be on Tinder, go do that. Do
Yeah.
all of it. That's what you're drawn
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. But I do think that you're right. Like self honesty without it. I think that's what made my relationship with my now husband so authentic from the beginning is like we were both really honest with ourselves and with each other from day one. And obviously, after having gotten with him, knowing his journey, it was like we were both on these journeys, learning for ourselves that ability to be honest with ourselves, that ability to be authentic with people and let go of the guards, let go of the game playing. That by the time we actually got with one another, there was just none of that. It was just pure conscious relating. And I feel like my story, I was in a 7-year long-term relationship off and on, breaking up, infidelity, like it was just the epitome of drama. And I don't fault him because I just think that his wounds and my wounds are just interacting in a
Yeah.
way and playing out. And I'm at peace with that, right? That was that stage of my life. And really, actually, it ended up being the contrast that then made me get really clear on what it was that I wanted.
Yeah. Sometimes that's what it takes.
Yeah, and we can see and I think that it's so powerful if you've gone through a breakup or you're going through a breakup, that's not fun and it's painful. And at the same time, like there is so much rich energy to sift through in that process that literally has the power to catapult you into what you really want and where you're meant to be. And I really feel like was not pretty and it was not easy, but I really did use that breakup as and even for me, like I had a moment with me and the universe where I was like, I am going to get to the bottom of this whole love thing. I am going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to obviously whatever default programming I have had in me from my upbringing has led me to this. I'm going on a journey and I'm going to figure this out. And so it was very much like a quest for me.
Yes. I
And
totally understand like how that feels. Cause even though I did meet my partner really young, I had a boyfriend before that actually. And even though we were like in high school, so like this stuff, you think it doesn't affect you. Maybe it doesn't for normal people, but I feel things very deep, a very emotional person. And so I had known that person since we were like kids. And we dated like really messily, like on and off before all that, before I met my partner, freshman and sophomore year. And it was like what I got from that experience when I look at it from my adult mind is I made a very mature choice that I didn't know that I was making, which was that we just weren't compatible in like life. Like there was a lot of intense emotion, very intense emotion, but we just were not compatible in lifestyle. And I was like, if they, which like sounds crazy to think of when you're like 14. And I was like, if this is really going to go somewhere, and I really felt like it could have, I was like, we're just not compatible. We don't want the same things like out of life. And we certainly don't want to go about like getting those things the same way. So when I met my partner now, when we were just friends, I knew immediately. I was like, oh, we're like life compatible, like lifestyle compatible, not just like the intense feelings.
Yeah, that's that you were able to get that at such a young age is it's so powerful because I think my approach, my automatic approach was like, I like him, I'm gonna try to force this and manipulate
Yeah.
it and control it and try to get it to match up rather than, like you said, be really honest of like, this isn't a match. And I really think like sooner you can get clear on that before you're emotionally involved, before you're physically involved, before you're then dealing with hormones and all of
Yeah,
that,
for sure.
right? Like the sooner you can get clear on that, depending on your purpose. If you're just out there playing the field and having a good time, then
Yeah.
let's just go do that. But if you are really clear that you want that monogamous relationship, you want marriage, then getting clear on whether they're a match as soon as possible. I I that mentality, I think, helped me sort through a lot faster when I just allowed myself to be clear and committed. That's what I was going for. But it did take a lot of courage
Yes.
to be clear on what I want and then also to say what I want and let them go if they weren't a match.
Yeah. Especially because there's only so much you can tell from like a first meeting. But I feel like with your intuition, sometimes it takes more time. But I feel like sometimes right away you can tell whether or not you and a person are going to mesh together well when it comes to like lifestyle and choices and things like
For sure. I think it's intuition and communication. I think I
yes.
definitely, like, have had situations where I knew somebody was not a right fit, and then I ignored that,
Yeah.
but also learning to ask the right questions and
Yeah.
being willing to say, "This is what I want, and this is a deal breaker for me," and actually just being willing to have those conversations because I think we're so often so naturally just trying to look good and trying to be liked and trying to get that external validation that the actual required communication will go out the window. And then real sometimes I'll ask clients or students like, "Does he want kids?" And they're like, "I don't know. They've been dating for 4 months." And I'm like, "Okay, well, thing to just like
Yeah.
again, unless you're just
Yeah.
playing the field, which is totally fine and there's no judgment about that. But if that's something that you want, like, speed that conversation up.
He's got it right on. Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I didn't have a lot of experience dating when I was older, but I think a lot of it was just I never really thought I would ever get in a long-term relationship or get married. It wasn't really something that I desired. I wasn't cynical. I loved watching people fall in love. Obviously, I told you about the rom-com, but I never it was more like that if I get in a relationship, it will be like this, but I never thought it was never like a must-have for me. And I think that's what's really interesting about me with me and my partner. She was the same way. She was like, "No, I wanted money and, like, success and a career. I never thought I wanted to be with someone long term," and I was the same way. So,
There you go.
sometimes it just
What you have the least resistance for.
yes. And I didn't have a lot of resistance around it, and neither did she.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you are, like, older, into your 20s, I think you start to with anything, not just with love, as you get older, you have more programming to, like, untangle and to sort through. So I think what you're saying about communication is way more of an issue when you get older about communicating clearly what you want with that other person.
So true. So true. Yeah, 100%. So, one of the things that you and I touched on in our last conversation was about like masculine, feminine energy. And that's definitely like I grew up to be an independent woman and to do everything myself and so like a lot of my default patterning in those relationships was like I was a breadwinner, like I did everything. And for me, embracing more feminine energy allowed me to be more receptive, to be provided for, to be in partnership. But I feel like masculine and feminine is talked about a lot, which is good. I'm glad that people are having the conversation. But I loved what you talked about last time about the masculine, feminine, not so much being attached to gender roles, but being more of like a core energetics. So, what would you like to share about that?
Yeah, I feel like the masculine feminine thing, being someone who is queer, like I'm bi, so I have men and I've dated women. I think it just those words don't necessarily resonate with me because I think it's a lot more fluid. And I think what was clear about me from a very young age is I have princess energy. I had expectations for no matter who I dated. So those expectations have carried out with men, with women, with like just people in the world. So I think it's more about, I would say, not even like a provider, because like for me, I like making money. That's like where I shine. But I don't think I've carried my bags in maybe 8 years. So I think it's not as simple as just being a feminine person or a masculine person, but more about expectations of, like, how you expect to be treated in your daily life. Like, do you want to be more, like, pampered and princessed and that kind of vibe? Or do you want it to be more of an equals vibe? Or are you very, like, about which is there's nothing wrong with that. If you're a cis hetero woman and you want, like, a man that's really masculine, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's about just being clear about what kind of treatment you want. That's what I focused on. Not
Mhm.
necessarily that I don't necessarily feel like I'm, like, a feminine being.
Mhm.
I just feel like there are things about me, like, that I guess some people would call more feminine.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like in my experience, the biggest breakthrough for me was at one point I started making the masculine energy wrong. And then it like I
Mm.
have to not be masculine, I have to be feminine. And then that became
Yes,
an
yeah.
obsession. But the truth of the matter is we all have both. And that's gonna get expressed in different ways. And for me, like the biggest transformation was understanding that really I had to learn to modulate between the two. That there was going to be times in life where my masculine energy does have to get expressed. And like you said, like the clarity around like I want it to. I also enjoy making money. I enjoy taking action. But learning to go from that and transition to be feminine when that energy is more potent to the situation. Also, so I don't burn myself out because, in my experience, if we're just in masculine all the time, it's like recipe for adrenal burnout. And yeah, it goes with my human design too, because I'm a projector.
Uh,
I think what I love about what you're saying is it's not about making anything wrong, but it's about attuning to what is true for you and not necessarily you don't necessarily have to look at just the energy of it, but it's also in like lifestyle, in how you're going to be treated, in how you want those dynamics to function. And I think those can, like, focusing on that can apply really to anything, right? Like,
yes,
really
yeah.
can apply to anything, but definitely in relationships. Trying to think, is there anything else where you've seen people get tripped up on the masculine feminine thing?
I feel like when you try to define yourself to the same way you were saying, there's going to be times in life you have to express both. I feel like there's just a lot of energy, especially in the spiritual community, where like you need to be in your feminine receiving energy to manifest. And that's just not true. That's just not true. It's not like in all the years I've been teaching this and doing this and living my own life, there were times I really wanted something and I pushed. I was pushy and assertive and did everything you're not supposed to do, and it worked. And then there have been times in my life where I had something where I was like, oh, whatever, and had that very like leaned back approach, and it also worked. So I think it's just a matter of not trying to put yourself in a box and being more clear about, like I said, treatment. Because for me, I like to make money, but it was really important to me specifically, doesn't need to be important to anyone else, that if I didn't want to work, my partner needed to be willing to work, like to take care of things if I didn't want to anymore.
Mm,
Like I wasn't like it's not even really a 50-50 thing for me. I think we both just like making money. But if that ever changed, I know that she would be willing to make the money and I could just stay home and have a YouTube channel or something.
yeah.
So that was important to me. And some people would say that means I have the more feminine role, but for me, it doesn't feel that way necessarily. It just feels like I'm very clear about what I expect.
Yeah.
And I don't get hung up on like what that means because I feel like it's also confusing when you're like always being told you need to be super feminine and not be masculine or you won't attract love. I just don't think that's true.
Agreed. Yeah. Again, I think it just goes down to what works for you. And when you start walking down that path where you stop, like, you stop, I don't want to say stop believing like the conditioning that's been put in, like it has to be a certain way and you have to match up this certain way. We get that from our family, we get that from society, right? Where if you can let go of all of that and keep training yourself to get in tune with what works for you, then that's where your answers are going to lie, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's you're in masculine, you're in feminine, you're the provider, you're the receiver, you're a bit of both because you like both, like that gets to show up. And I really think that's for me, like tying this to manifestation, that is the creation of it. And I think actually believing that we can have it the way that we want it is a real core foundational belief to actually allow us to do the thinking and the internal sorting to then be able to actually live it, right? And actually create it.
Yeah, I think that like having aspirations when you're trying to manifest love is really important because I feel like there can be a lot of pressure to be realistic or to not expect certain things. I actually hear that advice a lot of don't watch too many movies or don't read too many books. But I think if you are just very honest with yourself about what you want, a lot of the time the universe will show up for it. I remember when I was really young, I wanted all of my friends had their kiss in eighth grade, but I was a freshman and I hadn't had my first kiss. And the reason is because all of my friends had their first kiss at lunch or something. And I was like, no, I grew up watching these movies. Like, it needs to be like the movies. I was so settled. And my friends were like, that doesn't happen. That's just the movies. But I ended up having my first kiss on the top of a Ferris wheel with
Ah,
Tyler. You can have it literally, like, you can have it the way you want it. And it's like not settling for something that you don't want. Like, it's about being very honest about the kind of like dynamic and the kind of experiences that you're looking for. It seems silly, but like it was important to me that like when my children asked me, what was your first kiss? I didn't say, oh, in line at lunch or something. No, no, that was not good enough for me. So it's about just being really honest with yourself, even if it makes you feel silly or like it's unrealistic.
I love this so much. I relate to it in my journey of manifesting my husband because the thing that was funny was I think deep down I knew I wanted to be married, but I
Mhm.
never it's like I wouldn't acknowledge that to myself, and then I would,
Mm.
like, not actually check and see if they're marriage material or check and see if that's what they wanted in the people that I would date. So I would just like, my internal strategy was like, when they love me, they'll just do whatever I want, right? Which is not a good
Okay.
strategy if that's your strategy out there, okay? And when I got honest with myself about that, and no, it's not just no, if somebody loves you, they're just gonna love you. That doesn't mean they're gonna compromise their own moral
Yeah. Don't want
values.
some desires.
That's 2 totally different things. And I had been I had gotten out of that 7-year relationship. I was single for 3 years and I was dating. And at first I was just dating to date because I was always in a relationship. I had never dated before. And then I started to feel like I really wanted to be in a relationship again. And that was a little bit perplexing to me because my experience with past relationships weren't great. So when I got honest that I wanted to be married, I realized that how I was going to date had to shift and that just like hanging out for no reason was not really in alignment for me. And especially because I was online dating and I did meet my now, spoiler alert, right? I did meet my now husband online. And those of you who are on the online dating journey, it's not you, it's online dating. It's and actually, it took a woman at one point. I was out with a couple of girlfriends, and I think it was maybe 3 or 4 months into online dating, and I had been ghosted. And I was just like, I just and Of course, my patterns were to question myself and my own value and if I'm good enough. And the girl who had clearly been at this a lot longer than me turned to me and was like, it's not you, it's online dating. And it took so much pressure off. And anyway, it was not too long after that experience that I was like, okay, I'm not wasting my time. I'm not going on another coffee date or drinks or anything like that unless I know the person wants a relationship and wants to be married, which means that anybody that asks me out on a date, I then have to say, do you want this? Because if you don't,
So brave.
Evan messaged me and we're chatting. And then the chatting stage was over and it was time to talk on the phone and move towards meeting. And so we talk on the phone. And again, I have reached this point where I'm done playing games. I'm done trying to weave my way to get what I want. I'm just going to say what I want and just deal with the consequences. So I literally never met this man before. He wants to go on a coffee date with me. And I literally am like, so I just want to let you know that what I'm up to in this whole dating thing is I really want a lifelong love affair. Like that's what I want. I want to create a really amazing relationship. I want to be married. I'm not in a hurry, like doesn't have to happen by next week, but I also just don't want to waste my time. So I just need to know, is that something that you're up for? And if you're not, no judgment. And he was like dead silent on the other end of the phone. And I'm like, just have no idea what's about to happen here, right? Did I just open myself up for rejection? And he responds and says, my parents have been married for 40 years, so I know what it is that you're talking about. And I'm
Mm.
like,
I was like, but maybe this one, okay.
go to coffee with me. You can go to coffee with me. It just gave me enough to know that he was aligned with what I want.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was a game changer for me because it again, back to that main character energy. I'm main character. This is the quest that I'm on. Are you a fit for the quest? And if not,
Hmm.
house. Right.
Hmm.
And send you off with love, right? No
Yeah.
problem.
No judgment.
Play the field, do the one night stands, do all the things. Good for you. Have a great time. But this is what I'm up to. And isn't it interesting that the one person that I actually take that on and actually take that way of being, take that sort of queen energy actually ends up being the person that I
Yeah, your husband. Yeah. No, because in that moment, like you owned it. You were honest with yourself. And that's why it happened. Cause like for me, like I said, I didn't ever really want like a long-term relationship. It just wasn't something maybe I just wasn't old enough yet to like really want that. But I did know that if I ever had one, they had to be my friend first. That was really important to me. That doesn't have to be everyone's dynamic. Totally no judgment if that's not your thing. But for me, I am a friends to lovers girly. That is the trope that I will read over and over. And I wanted that for myself because at the end of the day, like this person, I'm going to spend my life with them. They need to be my best friend. Like this person needs to get me in a way. And that is what I got. That's exactly the story. That's how it unfolded, and it's just about being, like, really radically honest and not accepting anything that's not what you want, just because you feel like you're running out of time or, like, it's too or whatever it is that you feel.
And I think for me, I think where the self-worth thing came in was it's not like that self-worth was required, but I think self-worth was required for me to stand and own all of that. But it was the
Ah,
owning of that actually, I think, really set the stage for something.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, growing up, I did not have great self-worth, but what I have always had is a lot of self-assuredness. I've
Mm.
always known who I am and what I want. And that I feel like for me mattered more than how I felt about myself because that kind of confidence came with time. But definitely as a teenager, I was deeply depressed and very low self-worth. But I was always very self-assured. Very.
I don't love that you had that experience, but what I love about in your sharing of that and having that distinction between being self-assured and being feeling self-worthy. It's again this message that you don't, and I know we align on this, you don't have to be a perfect human. You don't have to vibrate at this perfect frequency and have all of these self-worth, self-confidence, self-assuredness, and all those things checked. You can focus on a few of them. You can rest in a few of them and that's plenty. So I just wanted to point that out because I know I have fallen in a trap of feeling like I had to have like it all figured out for my
Yes, yeah.
manifestations to work and I had to measure up in some way. And it just, and I love that you reinforced that. It's just like manifestation is so natural to us as humans
Yes.
that it really doesn't require us to build ourselves up to some impossible
No.
perfection.
I think that for me, I really think it's important for people to understand that, especially if you've been in a long-term relationship, you understand there's certain healing you cannot do without another person. You cannot heal yourself to perfection where you behave perfectly in a relationship. Like I was in a committed relationship with commitment issues. And because that she is saintly patient, but because she was ready to get married, like I knew we would get married when we were like 18. And that idea, I was like, hell no. Like I didn't think I would ever get married. And it wasn't about not staying together. I always knew that we would be in each other's lives in some form. It was not about that for me. But the idea and the institution of marriage really freaked me out. I was not about it. I was like, when people get married, they get divorced. Like I had a lot of issues around that. And she was like, I'm not in a rush. She just was like, never put pressure on me. And I think that's why I understand it doesn't matter if you're in main character energy, if you behave badly or maybe you don't react to something the best, because she was really patient about it. And randomly, the clock went off at like 25. I was like, oh, actually, I think I do want to get married. And it just happened very naturally, no pressure, like, maybe she was like, "I knew you'd get there eventually." Like, it's fine.
That is so awesome. I love that. It sounds like it was like very organic and natural. But I also want to really highlight what you said about how much we heal and how much of our stuff can get sorted out inside of relationships.
Yeah.
And I want to add to that that it actually happens in the dating process too. And that was another big
Yeah.
shift for me that when I stopped looking at dating like it was this like scary, horrible, awful thing, and I started to view it as an opportunity for growth and development, then when my shit would come up, when the rejection triggers and all whatever, like whatever it was, like finding another one that wasn't the one, or getting ghosted again, or sending my picture to somebody and then never having them respond back, like just all the stuff, right? Like all the
Yeah.
stuff that comes up from putting yourself out there. But when you can start to take it slow and look at your reactions and look at your thinking and look at how you're interpreting all of that, it's not, I wanna say, like, it gives you a thicker skin, but it's not really about having a thick skin. It's like you have so much more consciousness and awareness that then your triggers aren't running the show anymore, right? Because
Yes.
triggers aren't running the show anymore, and more of you and your soul and your consciousness gets to rule your time there. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then yeah, and then same thing in relationship, right? Particularly, and I always recommend when people ask what to put on their list is somebody who's willing to work through shit because
Yeah, for sure.
it's life, like, you got
Yeah.
to. And so someone who really believes in growth, however that looks for them, but if it's a match for you, that's what is going to be at the core of having a healthy, enjoyable long-term relationship. Yeah, it sounds like you agree with that.
Yeah, I 100% agree that that's just the most important part is, like, knowing that you're with someone that can work through things, because I think we can be very quick to label something as, like, toxic, and they're not that toxic relationships aren't real, they are definitely real, but having issues doesn't make your relationship toxic, because there's no such thing as, like, healing to the point of where you're in a relationship and you're perfect, because, someone else is always gonna bring things that you might not even know are there.
100%. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Do you have any more, like, messages for people out there looking for love, creating, manifesting it?
I just want especially, like, the romantic people, the romantics, like, listening to this, that you are valid, like, your vision is not too much, it's not unrealistic, like, my whole, like, dating life has been a Hallmark movie, and if that's what you want, that's what you can get, it really does exist, like, the movies, the books, it does exist if it's what you want. But if that's, like, not your thing and you're not looking for that, you just want, like, a partner, there are definitely more grounded people that don't necessarily live in the clouds like I do, but the point is, no matter how you want it, it's available. If you're someone I want the meet cute, please do not force yourself to go to speed. or do a bunch of things that don't feel like aligned for you. I do agree that you need to put yourself out there because you can't just sit at home and sometimes maybe they do appear, come to your door.
I
I'm
do
sure
have a
the stories
story of a friend who she married the cable guy. The ga
yes, yes. Sometimes they will literally come to your door. But, like, how you want it is how you can have it, and for me, I did not settle for something that I love your dating journey, but that is not for the faint of heart. Like, that it is not for the faint of heart, and I knew that, yeah, for me, it needed to be, like, a friends first kinda thing because especially when I was younger, I had a lot of trust issues, and that was the gateway to trust for me was friendship.
Yeah, I agree with you, and Evan and I actually we were in friend energy for a good 3, almost 4 months before
Yeah. Oh,
things
yeah, it's super important. It
progressed.
doesn't even necessarily take that long,
No.
but, like, when your relationship is built on friendship, I feel like it's so much stronger.
Yeah,
Then
and always have
getting
that to go back to no matter what
yeah,
else is going on. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so true, so true. So how can people I know you offer Voxer coaching, which those of you who are
yeah.
listening, if you don't know what Voxer is, I love it. It's an amazing messaging app. It's like a walkie-talkie app. It's free in your phone. And it's like the way that Jasmine coaches instead of getting on calls. So how tell us about that actually. And then
Well, right now, I do manifestation coaching, so if you have a problem or an area of life that you wanna work on, including relationships, we work on that area. We go through your limiting beliefs, we work on your self-concept, and we basically transform that area of your life, and I've helped people many times with relationships with even their career changes and different life changes, just manifesting in general is what I do.
you can find Jasmine at Return to Daydreams on Instagram. I love saying your handle. It's so cute. Yeah. Were you gonna
Yes, so yeah, I didn't know if you were gonna say it or I was gonna
Yeah.
say it. So I recently have a podcast. It only has 1 episode right now, but there will be more episodes, but it's all at Return to Daydreams. It's Instagram is the same, my blog is the same, and the podcast is Return to Daydreams Radio. So
Perfect. Okay, awesome. I'm excited to see your podcast go fully live. And yeah, you guys reach out to her, follow her, and let us know what's going on in your dating life. Send us
I know I
messages
want all the
on
juicy
Instagram.
gossip.
What's happening? Yeah, and what from this episode really made a difference for you? We'd love to know.